I stared at my phone screen, the words blurring slightly as my brain tried to process what I'd just read. 3:22 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. I'd been sitting at my desk halfway through finishing invoices when Brianna's name lit up my notifications. My ex, 27 years old. The woman I'd spent 3 years loving before we fell apart 8 months ago. The message was cold and direct. She was pregnant. Claimed the baby was mine. Made it clear she wanted nothing from me. No support, no visits, nothing. She'd raise this child alone. Just thought I should know, she'd written, like she was informing me about a change in weather. I sat there for a full minute, my cursor blinking on the invoice I'd been working on. Then I typed back 2 words. Understood. Almost immediately, 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, her response came through. That's it? Just understood? I confirmed. She called me cold, told me I'd shown my true colors, and demanded I never contact her again. I set the phone down gently and opened my filing cabinet, pulling out a folder I'd labeled 2 years ago. Inside was a DNA test report. The same test that had quietly destroyed whatever trust remained between Brianna and me, though I tried to hold us together for another year after discovering the truth. 2 years and 3 months ago, Brianna had convinced herself she was pregnant. The whole thing became this elaborate production. Baby names, nursery plans, late-night talks about our future. Then, one evening, she came home in tears, telling me she'd lost it. Something about her story felt wrong from the beginning. The timeline kept shifting. Details changed. When I suggested we visit her doctor together just to make sure she was okay, she turned it into an accusation. Said I didn't trust her, that I was making her grief worse. But I couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at me. So I did something I'm still not proud of. I took a strand of her hair from her brush and sent it to a lab, along with genetic material from what she'd claimed was her miscarriage, tissue I'd discreetly kept from a discarded wrapper. The results came back definitive. No genetic match. The tissue wasn't even human. Based on the analysis, it was likely chicken liver or something similar. I never confronted her. Instead, I slowly pulled away, let the relationship dissolve over compatibility issues. She never knew what I'd discovered. Until now, apparently, she thought she could try the same con again. I photographed the DNA test results and scrolled through my contacts until I found Diane's number. Brianna's mother. We'd always gotten along. She used to joke that she preferred me to her own daughter sometimes. I typed carefully, explaining that Brianna had just informed me of her pregnancy and wanted no involvement from me. Then I attached the photo from 2 years ago and told her I thought she deserved to know the truth before any decisions were made. My phone started ringing within 30 seconds. Diane's messages came rapid fire, demanding to know what I was showing her, whether I was saying what she thought I was saying. She told me to stay put. They were coming over. 22 minutes later, fists pounded against my door. I opened it to find Diane standing there, her face flushed with fury, dragging Brianna by the arm. Her daughter's face was swollen and red from crying, her eyes refusing to meet mine. Diane didn't ask permission. She commanded me to let them inside, practically throwing Brianna onto my couch before demanding to see everything. I pulled out the physical folder, the original test results, my documentation of the timeline, everything I'd kept locked away for 2 years. With each page Diane reviewed, her face grew darker, angrier. Finally, she turned to Brianna with barely controlled rage and asked her daughter if she'd faked a pregnancy. Faked a miscarriage. Brianna was sobbing, insisting it wasn't like that she'd thought she might be pregnant and then wasn't sure, and I'd been so sweet about everything and she didn't want to disappoint me. I asked her calmly if she'd bought animal organs to stage the miscarriage. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the muffled sound of my neighbor's television through the wall. Brianna looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper, asking how I knew. I told her the truth, DNA test, the tissue wasn't human. Diane stood up slowly, her movements deliberate, and turned back to her daughter. She asked about this pregnancy, demanded an answer. Brianna stared at the floor and admitted she was pregnant. Then came the word that changed everything. But the room held its breath. Diane's voice dropped to something deadly quiet, asking whose baby it really was. Brianna whispered a name, Trevor. Her married coworker, Trevor, the one with 2 kids and a wife at home. Diane didn't need confirmation. She pieced it together instantly. Brianna was trying to trap me because Trevor refused to leave his family. When Diane said it aloud, it wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Brianna's crying turned desperate and ugly. She insisted we didn't understand, that Trevor had promised he loved her, promised he was getting divorced. But then, his wife got pregnant again and he said he couldn't leave, and Brianna was already 2 months along and she didn't know what else to do. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces clicking into place. She'd told me she didn't want my involvement, knowing I'd never abandon a child I thought was mine. She was counting on my sense of responsibility, betting I'd fight for parental rights and support her despite her protests. Through her tears, she looked up at me and admitted it. I'd always been good to her, always responsible. She knew I'd step up even if she said she didn't want me to. I'd never let a child of mine go without. I reminded her quietly that it wasn't my child. She said I wouldn't have known that. The slap came so fast I barely saw Diane's hand move. The crack echoed through my apartment like a gunshot. Diane called her daughter disgusting, reminded her of everything I'd done, paid for her coding boot camp, supported her while she was finding herself, treated her with respect and love, and this was how she'd chosen to repay me. The next morning, I woke up to my phone exploding with Instagram notifications. 67 of them. Brianna had posted a long story about how I was a deadbeat dad abandoning her in her time of need. She'd written something about men who sweet-talk you through fears, then run when faced with real consequences. Tagged it with single mom empowerment hashtags and warnings about men like me. The comments section was vicious. Her friends tore into me, calling me every name they could think of. One of them wrote an entire paragraph about how men like me should be chemically castrated. But Diane has Instagram too. Her comment appeared like a bomb dropping into the thread. She asked if she should post the DNA test showing Brianna had faked a pregnancy 2 years ago, or if she should mention that her daughter had admitted the baby belonged to her married coworker. She tagged the whole situation, calling Brianna a liar and a homewrecker, and said I was the victim. The comment section detonated. Within an hour, Brianna had deleted everything. But I'd already taken screenshots, saved them all for my records. Screenshots live forever. Then came the message from Trevor's wife. Eliza asked if it was true, if Brianna was really pregnant with her husband's baby. I sent her everything. Screenshots of the conversation, the confession from my apartment. I'd recorded it all, one-party consent state. 20 minutes later, Eliza posted everything on Facebook, tagging Brianna, tagging Trevor, tagging their workplace. She called it a public service announcement, exposing the workplace friend Trevor had insisted she was paranoid about. That night, Trevor showed up at my door. This man actually had the audacity to be angry with me. He shouted that I couldn't just leave it alone, that Brianna hadn't been asking me for anything, that I could have walked away. Instead, I'd played detective and ruined everything. I actually laughed at him. Asked him what exactly I'd ruined, his affair, his marriage, his web of lies. He told me Eliza was taking everything in the divorce, the house, the kids, all of it. Brianna wouldn't even talk to him anymore, blamed him for not leaving his wife sooner. I told him it sounded like a him problem. He stepped forward, trying to look threatening. I reminded him he was 5'8" with the muscle mass of a string bean, and my doorbell camera was recording every second. If he wanted to assault me on camera, it would definitely help his custody case. He deflated immediately, his whole body sagging. He admitted pathetically that Brianna had told him she was on birth control. I showed him the DNA test from 2 years ago. His face went white as paper. He whispered that he destroyed his family for a psychopath, then started crying right there in my doorway. This grown man sobbed about how his life was over. Part of me felt sympathy. The other part remembered he was a married father who'd made his choices. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. After Diane dragged Brianna out of my apartment, literally grabbed her by the ear like a child, I thought it was over. But the next wave came fast. Brianna's father, Harold, called me threatening legal action for defamation, said I'd humiliated his little girl, aired private family business, and was probably the reason she'd felt the need to lie in the first place. I explained calmly the truth is an absolute defense against defamation. He accused me of calling his daughter a liar. I corrected him. I was saying she lied. There's a difference between judging someone's character and stating facts backed by DNA evidence. He hung up on me. Then the extended family piled on. Brianna's Aunt Rosa posted on Facebook about how certain people needed to mind their own business and keep family matters private. Diane shot back that her daughter had tried to commit fraud, which was a crime, not a family matter. The Facebook war dragged on for hours, cousins choosing sides, until Grandma Ethel chimed in saying that in her day this would have been handled quietly. That sparked an entire generational debate. Then Brianna showed up at my workplace. I work at a small marketing firm, maybe 20 employees total. Everyone knows everyone. She arrived visibly pregnant now, crying at the reception desk, begging to talk to me about our baby. Grace called me down. I brought my manager Carl as a witness. I told her she needed to leave. She begged, apologized, said the baby needed a father. I told her to ask Trevor to step up. She said he wouldn't, that his wife was divorcing him, and he'd washed his hands of the whole situation. She insisted I was a good man who could be a wonderful father, that biology didn't matter. Carl stepped in, threatened to call security. Brianna wailed that she was pregnant. I said loudly enough for the gathering crowd to hear that she was pregnant with someone else's baby, that she'd already admitted it wasn't mine, and this was harassment. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. The whole office heard her confession. Her face transformed from fake sadness to genuine horror. She screamed that I'd recorded her. I reminded her about one-party consent laws and told her to leave before I filed a restraining order. She left screaming that I was a sociopathic monster who'd destroyed her life. Grace looked at me after she was gone and said my ex was insane. I filed for the restraining order. The judge granted it temporarily after hearing the recording and reviewing the evidence of fraud and harassment. That's when Brianna completely spiraled. She called my mother, actually called my 62-year-old mom, and told her she was carrying her grandchild. My mom, bless her heart, told her gently that I'd already sent her the recording, that she knew the baby wasn't mine, and that even if it were, she wouldn't want Brianna in our family after what she'd done. She suggested Brianna get help. Brianna's response was to tell my mom I was gay and in denial, which was why I was rejecting her and the baby. My mom shut that down immediately, mentioning that even if I were, she'd be fine with it. But I wasn't. Especially considering I'd been dating that lovely girl Meredith from my gym for the past month. Yeah, I'd started seeing someone new. Nothing too serious yet, but Meredith was great. She thought this whole situation was absolutely bonkers and had been incredibly supportive throughout. After my mom shut her down, Brianna contacted my ex-girlfriend from college. Jessica called me laughing, said Brianna had DM'd her asking if I'd ever shown violent tendencies. Jessica told her the only violence I'd ever shown was against pizza rolls at 2 in the morning. Then, Harold decided to take matters into his own hands. He showed up with 2 of his brothers, Rick and Paul. 3 middle-aged men trying to intimidate me into doing the right thing. Harold said I was going to marry his daughter. I laughed and said no. He insisted she was pregnant and alone. I reminded him she was pregnant with Trevor's baby, which made it Trevor's problem. Rick stepped forward, trying to look tough. I told them I was smart enough to have this conversation on my doorbell camera, and my neighbor was a cop who was probably home. They left, but Harold promised I'd regret this. I told him the only thing I regretted was not seeing who his daughter really was sooner. The next day, my landlord called. Harold had reported me for running a drug operation. My landlord, who I'd known for 5 years, laughed it off and gave me a heads up. Then they called my work claiming I'd been embezzling. My boss told them to provide proof or face legal action. They hung up. The peak of desperation came when Brianna posted in a pregnancy support group on Facebook saying she'd been abandoned and needed help. She raised $1,400 before someone recognized her from Eliza's viral post and exposed her in the comments. The admin investigated, banned her, and demanded she return the money or face fraud charges. Court day arrived. Brianna showed up in a maternity dress that made her look ready to deliver triplets, even though she was only 3.5 months along. Harold sat beside her, along with some lawyer who looked like he'd gotten his degree from a cereal box. My lawyer Janet had everything organized: the fake pregnancy test, the recordings, the screenshots, the workplace harassment, the false accusations, all of it. Brianna's lawyer tried arguing I'd emotionally manipulated her into lying about paternity. Janet asked how someone emotionally manipulates another person into sleeping with their married coworker. He claimed I'd been withholding affection. Janet noted we'd been broken up for 8 months when she got pregnant. The judge looked exhausted. Brianna took the stand and tried to cry without producing actual tears. She kept touching her belly dramatically, talking about how devastated she was that I wouldn't step up for this innocent baby. The judge asked her directly if I was the biological father. She said biology didn't determine fatherhood. The judge repeated the question. After a long pause, she admitted no. When asked who the biological father was, she said she didn't see how that was relevant. The judge granted the restraining order for 2 years. Brianna screamed that I was ruining her life. Harold called me a coward. Security escorted them out. Outside the courthouse, Trevor was waiting with papers for Brianna to sign away any claim to child support. The meltdown that followed was spectacular. Brianna hit him with her purse. Harold tried to grab Trevor. Trevor's lawyer recorded everything. Someone else filmed it too, and it ended up on local news. 3 people got arrested: Harold, Brianna, and Rick, who'd shown up for support. Brianna had to pay back the $1,400 she'd fraudulently raised. She got banned from multiple pregnancy groups after her story went viral in those communities. Trevor's divorce finalized. Eliza took him apart financially. He ended up in a studio apartment, paying alimony and child support for his actual kids, refusing to acknowledge Brianna's pregnancy. Brianna tried suing me for emotional distress. The lawyer literally laughed her out of his office. I know because his secretary is friends with Grace from my work. The karma came full circle when their company fired both Brianna and Trevor for violating the fraternization policy. Brianna tried claiming pregnancy discrimination, but they had documentation of the affair and evidence she'd used the company computers to research how to convince an ex-boyfriend a baby was his and whether you could fake DNA tests. She ended up unemployed, pregnant, living with her parents, with a restraining order hanging over her head. Diane called me last week apologizing for everything, saying she was getting Brianna therapy but didn't think she was accepting responsibility yet. Brianna still believed I'd ruined her life by not going along with her plan. I told Diane I hoped she got help. She called me a good man, better than her daughter deserved. Brianna had the baby, a boy. Trevor signed away his parental rights before the birth. She tried putting my name on the birth certificate anyway. The hospital called me because she'd listed me as the father. I sent them the restraining order and court documents. They had to get security to remove Harold when he made a scene about them not listing my name. Through the grapevine, I heard Brianna's still living with her parents. Harold and Diane are divorcing. Apparently, this situation exposed a lot of underlying issues. Trevor moved to another state to start fresh. Eliza's dating a doctor she met at her gym and living her best life. Rosa still posts passive-aggressive memes about family loyalty. As for me, Meredith and I are officially together. She's amazing, funny, smart, honest. What a concept. She jokes that she owes Brianna a thank you card for being crazy enough that I was single when we met. My company gave me a raise after everything. Carl said I'd handled it professionally, and it showed character. I moved to a better apartment with actual security, just in case Harold gets any more bright ideas. Janet sent me a Christmas card with a photo of my case file labeled Easiest Slam Dunk of 2024. Last month, a mutual friend told me Brianna's been telling people I'm the one who baby-trapped her and abandoned her when she wouldn't marry me. Even her own mother doesn't buy it anymore. People asked if I feel bad about how it all went down. Honestly, no. I could have ignored her text and let her live with her lies. But she tried to defraud me into raising another man's child. She faked a pregnancy and miscarriage. She tried destroying my reputation, my job, my relationships. She played stupid games and won stupid prizes. The only people I feel bad for are that baby, who'll grow up with Brianna as a mother, and Diane, who seems like a decent person drowning in chaos her daughter creates. But that's not my problem anymore. It never really was. To anyone dealing with something similar, document everything. Trust your gut. Never let someone manipulate you into taking responsibility for their choices. Brianna, if you're reading this, and I know someone will send it to you, your son deserves better than this drama. Get help for his sake, if not your own. And no, Harold, I won't tell you where I got that DNA test done 2 years ago. Stop asking.